Yes, so welcome to the Don't Encourage Us program, where we talk about things with people and stuff, and nothing's off limits, right?
That's right.
That was more or less, nailed it.
You heard that? That's the audience.
Oh,
it's a live studio audience.
Silent applause. Nice. So I'm your host, Roadblock, and I'm here with my co-host, Cover Girl. How you doing, CG?
Doing great, Roadblock. I thought there was something wrong with the streaming platform we're using because it kept saying Roadblock every time I put the mouse over the right-hand corner. I'm like, what does it mean by Roadblock? Is there something wrong with the stream?
You don't even remember your co-host name. That's terrible. So today we're discussing the 1950s NBC radio program, Dimension X. But first, what's been on your list this week?
This week I saw a series on, you guessed it, Netflix. Netflix.
So that's minus $5.
Yeah, exactly, because I didn't say it right. Thanks to our sponsor, Netflix.
Your check is going to be poorly written because of that.
That's the other.
So you watched something on Netflix.
I did,
wow.
yeah.
Longtime listeners are shocked.
They are. It's called Behind Her Eyes. It's a limited series. It's about a woman who has an affair with a psychologist, and there's a jealous wife involved, and there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. That's all I can say, because there's a lot of twists and turns in this one. It was pretty interesting, right up until the very end, where there's a really big plot twist. I liked it. It was good. Recommend it. And it stars Bono's daughter, actually, which I didn't know she was an actress. I didn't know he had a daughter.
What is her name? Bono? Does she use Bono as a last name? Like, what is her name?
Something Hewson. So that's his real name.
Huh. Yeah, I guess she doesn't get to capitalize on Dad's fame unless she casually brings it up regularly.
In quotes.
Yeah, it's like her middle name is U2.
Yeah. U2. Or The Edge.
That's got to suck though, right? Like, I mean, literally every time you want a leg up, you've got to have your dad like make a phone call, you know, like a video call to somebody with his guitar or whatever.
Or always have one of their songs on in the background. It's like a casual segue into it.
You've got to rush the stage or arrange to give your dad every award he gets just for the FaceTime on screen.
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
That's hard. Wow. That's the worst kind of nepotism.
It's hard to name drop that one, I think. Yeah.
I mean, how do you work that in? Well, it's like being Madonna's kid, you know?
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
Know. You want to see naked pictures of my mom? Here's a coffee table book. She autographed it right in the same spot, you would think.
That's not awkward, is it? Not at all.
Well, look, if it gets you the job, you know, you do what you got to do in showbiz.
That's true.
So you recommend that one, huh?
Yeah, that was good. Netflix has a lot of great programming. Out of all the streamers, they're the best streamer.
I'm cutting all this.
Out of all the streaming platforms in the land, they're the best value for your dollar. I highly recommend them. Amazing
like
craftsmanship.
Somehow you're getting it free.
Yeah. Now I am.
Well
How
played.
about you? Did you use
All right.
Did you use that other competing streaming platform to watch a program? Not to be named here, of course.
Actually, no. I've been scaling back. I got an email. I don't know if you got this email, right? So I got an email from Amazon. Didn't make me very happy. It said, starting later this month, this was like 2 weeks ago, starting later this month, we're going to add commercials to Amazon Prime Video streaming shows. Suck it. We're not going to lower your rates. You will take this and like it. And I was like, you know what? I don't like that. So I'm scaling back. I think they've gotten a little bit out of control. I think they are overly optimistic. Not just Amazon, but all the streaming services. They're overly optimistic about how much money or advertising dollars they're going to get out of me. So I am cutting them all down to just the bare minimums, the ones that will charge a reasonable rate, no commercials, and everything else has got to go. Did you get a similar email?
From Netflix. I did. It was actually from T-Mobile because I get Netflix through T-Mobile, actually. So
I knew it.
am
I
getting
knew
it.
you got some kind of deal or something. That's why you like Netflix so much.
Because I know the guys at T-Mobile. No. But they sent an email out. It says something. It's probably similar to the one that you got. It was so casual and so friendly and so upbeat. It's like something like Netflix is fantastic for streaming. We really hope you enjoy it. And by the way, starting like February 1st or something, we're going to be adding commercials to the experience. You can upgrade if you want to for X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
Enjoy your day.
Okay.
That's not so good, guys.
All right, everybody. It's time to take a stand. All right, we're not paying higher rates. We're not recreating cable bills just to watch a few shows. It's not worth it. It's time to cut the cord or the digital. What do we call this one? Cut the subscription?
Yeah,
I don't know.
cut the stream.
Cancel. That's very clever. Cancel the subscription. You heard it here first. Hashtag cancel the subscription.
So the next
really clever.
So the next episode's gonna start. So the next episode's gonna start with. So what did you get from the library this week?
No. You can keep watching Netflix, and everyone else can come here to find out what's on Netflix and what the twist was at the end. Right.
So everyone cancels their service and they just listen to this podcast. That's an idea.
That's right. They just listen to you. Yep. The Steve Report.
That's what they should do. Speaker number 2.
Well, let's talk briefly about something else that's been in the news lately. I think this is just the latest in a long string. It goes way, way back, but it's really been more of an issue in the last few years than I recall. Jonathan Majors, star of Creed, Lovecraft Country, Loki, Ant-Man, big, huge star, only getting bigger and bigger. Recently, I guess he lost the court case against his former girlfriend. I think she alleged abuse. And as a result of that court case, Disney fired him. So he lost his job. So what do you think about that kind of thing in Hollywood?
I think Hollywood's always after protecting their bottom line, no matter what. So anything that's controversial, even in the slightest, it seems now, especially now, they're going to step away from it as quickly as possible. So I think what's happening is kind of that Kanye effect with Adidas, where Adidas kept supporting him no matter what he said, right? And then at the last possible minute, they're like, well, we're severing ties. But it was kind of too late and the damage was done in terms of their credibility. So I think a lot of these major corporations, not just Hollywood studios, they tend to step away from controversy sooner than later. They'd rather feel the effects of stepping away than to let it ride.
But yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point right off the get-go here, which is it's not really about Disney in this case with Jonathan Majors. Disney has a responsibility to make money, and part of that is reading the audience, figuring out how they're going to react to things, and then making big moves accordingly. So presumably they evaluated the situation. They thought, you know what, even though it's going to cost us a lot of money and create a lot of confusion, let's go ahead and cut him loose, because if we put out these major films that he's scheduled to be in and build phases 5 and 6 are supposed to be built largely around Jonathan Majors' character. So big deal, right? But if we release these movies and we continue on this path, then audiences won't show up, right? I guess, right? That must have been the calculation there. Do you blame Disney? And it sounds like no, right? And you make a great point, right? It's not their job to decide morals or society or any of that kind of stuff. But let me ask you this. What do you think about a culture that reacts this way to this kind of thing? Just to put this one in context, and I'm going to pick on Jonathan Majors today. Obviously a very talented actor, right? Obviously emotionally unstable. He's got kind of a big mouth and his personality doesn't seem amazing. He was in what I assume was an emotionally unstable couple Probably or possibly they were both somewhat emotionally or physically abusive with each other. They should have broken up and gone different ways, but they weren't healthy enough to do that, right? I think that's a fairly reasonable assumption based on the information that they've put out there. Obviously, he has a huge flaw, but it isn't acting, So does it make sense in our culture that someone would lose their job because they have unrelated emotional problems? Is that the right response? What do you think about that?
That's a really good question. I don't know the definitive answer on that, obviously, but it seems like with certain parts of the creative sector, like acting, is looked upon differently than, let's say, he was a rock star in similar trouble. It seems like the public would forgive that, or seems to forgive that sort of thing much quicker than an actor. And it seems to be the case, right? Like all of these actors scandals versus, let's say, I don't know, some huge rock band like from the 80s, let's say Guns N' Roses or something, or even a modern rock band. It seems like people expect them to be unstable or be abusive or have drug problems or whatever it is, and it almost seems to add to their mystique in some way, even if that's not the right thing. But at the same time, it's why is that? Why is it that certain areas in the creative field are looked upon so differently, or a troubled writer, versus a troubled actor? But it seems that the focus is always placed on these actors. Robert Downey Jr., when he had all his problems, that was a really big deal. Yeah. But
sure,
don't rock stars have these issues all the time? And it's kind of just swept under the rug, it seems.
You make an excellent point, right? Like, obviously, there are double standards at play. And why that is maybe less important than the fact that it is. And maybe Jonathan Majors, this situation right now, is a chance for us as a country, or however you want to extend the culture here. Maybe it includes other countries as well, like people who consume the MCU products, maybe, or big budget films, right? Maybe that's the culture we're talking about. But how do we as a people want to respond when someone makes a lot of mistakes or they have problems? Maybe they hurt themselves or some other people, but it isn't directly related to or impact or tie, it's not a product of what they do for a living, right? So if someone's an accountant and they have lots of interpersonal problems or emotional issues or substance abuse, right? But it doesn't affect their accounting. If they commit a crime and they pay the penalty, should they also lose their job? If they do something obnoxious and maybe they start therapy, should they also lose their job? I don't know. Like, there's something about it that makes me uncomfortable. Like this issue that Jonathan Majors had. It seems to me that a more appropriate response would be for him to take some of that money and start pretty intensive therapy, around relationships, around self-esteem. And if he's not willing to do that and he's out there causing more problems, okay, sure. Maybe he doesn't deserve what he has, I guess, but it's based on his acting ability. So if people are aware that he's not great in relationships, that he's got a lot of problems, and they choose to be involved with him, and there's an unhealthy pattern there, but he continues to show up for work, do his job, and portray fictional characters well. I don't know. Is that our business? Do we need to insert ourselves as a culture into that and start voting with our dollars and things? I mean, is that who we want to be as a people? I don't know. What do you think?
I just think when things become so high profile, and I'm not passing judgment on him or what he did or didn't do, that's for a court to decide, but right. I think it taints, I think in a way it does taint that person's performances, whether they like it or not. Because I think in the back of a viewer's mind, they're always associated with whatever's going on around them in real life. And maybe that answers my whole question. Everything that you're watching an actor do is pretty much tainted by their personal life if you know too much about it. So this idea that the actor keeps his personal life or her personal life private makes a lot more sense to me now than it ever did.
Yeah, but that tainting is based on the individual's perception of this exact issue. So if a lot of people decided, hey, none of these people, none of these actors, none of my coworkers, nobody is perfect, right? Nobody's got it all figured out and nailed and, is doing everything really, really well. And so every now and then, via bad luck or bad decisions, that becomes public or it creates issues that spill over into other aspects of your life. And if everyone thought, or if most people thought, that the right way to respond to that is being supportive, encouraging them to get good help, to, improve themselves, make changes, maybe step back from work responsibilities or other things, and then go work on yourself, I think that might get better results than this sort of cancel culture that's evolved. So that tainting is really a product of people thinking it's wrong that you did that and kind of screw you, I guess, or now I don't like you. Whereas before I thought I knew you and I did like you.
Well, yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it brings up the whole issue of rehabilitation for someone who does something wrong in general in society.
And judgment. That's the piece I'm focused on, is judging others, right?
It's definitely not going to help the individual at the end of the day. So it's kind of like
Well, or the community, really, to judge like that. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, and you're judging from a place like, not you, just society in general is judging from a place of not really knowing the facts because they're not in that courtroom. You're getting an interpretation of what happened. And again, with the caveat here that I don't know this particular case or what happened or really the background behind it. And you're judging things based on what the media is telling you.
Well, and that right there, I think, is a key part of the problem, because the media wants you to think you know. They want to present themselves not as entertainers, not as, shock jocks, but they want to present themselves as a source of actual information. So they want you to watch some clips and listen to somebody talk and at the end of it say, I know Jonathan Majors. I know what he did or didn't do and what his relationship is. And therefore it's okay for me to judge and then, be tainted, I guess, right? So now his work is tainted, but we don't know. And the news, certainly not the way it is now, it doesn't teach us anything real about who he is or what he's dealing with.
It's completely unbalanced. We're not hearing the same type of coverage from the other side, fiction. Right?
I mean, listen, even if we did, right, I think I have enough experience with he said, she said to know to stay out of it for the most part. Probably they both have some pretty serious problems. There's nobody who's right, really, in this case. They're probably both wrong. They don't need a lot of publicity. I don't even know that they needed legal intervention, but they probably both needed a lot of separate therapy. And I think our involvement isn't really necessary. Our judgment isn't really necessary, But I think the news creates this illusion that we can judge, that we have the information, that we maybe even should judge on occasion. I don't know. I just don't know if that's the culture that we want.
I think that bleeds into a lot of different areas as well. Like, during the pandemic around the vaccine, people not willing to do their own research. I think that's a bigger factor. Not being willing to step back and say, like, is what I'm listening to the truth? If not, then will I go and actually figure things out or try and get different perspectives on it or look at different types of research around that topic and make my own decision on whether I think it's correct or not? I think that's really important. I think in society, having that scientific mindset, the logical ability to say, this seems skewed to me. Oh, it might be because of XYZ. Maybe this is something I shouldn't just take on face value.
Yeah, yeah, I think a more inquisitive, open-minded approach, like if you care enough to actually apply that to the Jonathan Majors issue, then when you talk about it, it might be a little boring because it's going to be kind of dry and it's going to be very complicated. You know, you'll have had to learn a lot about his background and the background of the woman that he was with and maybe other relationships that they've both had and so on. But maybe then you're in a position to add something useful or meaningful to the conversation around it. But honestly, I'm kind of okay just tuning out like his personal and private issues as well as his personal opinions about things, you know, whether he thinks he's great or what he thinks about politics or the environment. Like, I don't really care. I'm fine just going to watch him play like a crazy alien or whatever and then be done with him at that point. I think a lot of actors, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Like, they treat it as an indicator of more than just their performance or the quality of the film or the project they were in. Like, they take it as a sign of their own value as an individual beyond just that work that they did. And I think that's a mistake, but I think a lot in our culture, we kind of give into that. And we kind of think that, like George Clooney, oh, he must be this great guy who has all these wonderful qualities, but I don't know that, you know, like maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't really care. It's not like I'm friends with him. I'm okay just watching his movies and then calling it a day.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think it's this glorification of celebrity in general. Just you're projecting all of these qualities on people that you don't know at all. You know their performances in something, right, or you've seen their YouTube videos or their TikToks or whatever it might be, but to kind of say that they have very specific qualities beyond that, you don't really know. You don't really know them at all.
Well, know? That's my bottom line, right? Is if anything, I would love it if the culture here, our movie going culture, would simply accept that we don't know anything about these people. So they're not better than what we see and they're not worse. So if we think one of them is a great person who we've, you know, projected all these amazing qualities onto, and then we find out, oh no, they have a lot of problems. They're not a great person. It's not a fall, right? Like, we didn't know anything and we still don't really know anything, right? What little bit we've learned suggests that they've got serious issues in one part of their lives. I mean, that's just dropping the bucket, right? You're just scratching the surface. The truth is we don't know these people, and I'm fine with that. I don't feel like I need to know them to enjoy watching them play killer robots or, couples that fall in love. Like, I don't need to know the actor, and I don't need to judge or assume lots of things about their qualities as people. I just don't. I'm fine with taking them at the sort of surface value of the work that they're doing and then leaving everything else up to the systems in place to deal with all that. I think that's fine.
I think it's a slippery slope when you start going the other way. The counter argument to that you don't want to support someone.
What is the counter argument?
Well, someone might.
You don't want to support someone
whose qualities that you don't like, right? And that would.
Why though?
I don't know. Why would you not want that?
Well, I mean, Nazis aside, right? Nazis aside, why? Okay, let's Gina Carano or James Gunn. Let's use James Gunn. All right. So James Gunn was doing really well, was very successful, and then I guess somebody who hates him surfaced some old tweets that were supposed to be funny. Obviously, his sense of humor not being standard issue. And instead they came across, I believe, as homophobic, but they were from a decade earlier, and he kind of made the argument, I've changed as a person. So explain to me, like, what, not necessarily your opinion, but what would someone say about, I don't want to support James Gunn because he, 10 years ago, he tweeted some stuff that could be considered homophobic by today's standards. So I think he should not be allowed to direct films. Why is that? Why does that make sense? Like, how does that work in the favor of the person who boycotts James Gunn?
I mean, I think someone's thinking that they want to support, like they see an actor, they see a director, an entertainer as some kind of almost like a charity that they're giving money to kind of support the cause of their personality or who they are. And once that's kind of shattered for them, like, oh, I always thought they were XYZ, and I really liked their movies. I didn't know that they were ABC, meaning that bad thing. And now my vision of them is ruined, and I don't want to put my dollars towards them anymore, even though I enjoy their movies. There's no separation between the artistic piece and the person.
In my mind, you just acknowledge that you didn't know James Gunn that well. You know, like 10 years ago, he was tweeting that stuff. Well, God, now I realize that he's probably a more immature person than I thought, and he might have some prejudices that he needed to work on. Then he comes out and says, yeah, I was pretty immature and I had some prejudices I needed to work on. And I think I've come a long way, but it's an ongoing process and I will definitely work on this. So you boycott him. Are you scaring other people straight? Are we trying to create a society where everyone's afraid to do things that could be hurtful? Is that a good idea? I don't know. I mean, Jonathan Majors, you're not supporting shitty relationships by going to see a movie he's in. I don't see the connection. You're not saying it's okay to be in a bad relationship that's unhealthy where two people are alternating between loving and hating each other or making each other's lives better and worse, on a daily basis, going back and forth from their report. You're not supporting that. You're not voting for that. You're not increasing it in the world. You're just saying like, that's a mess. That's why they went to court. The courts will deal with it. Hopefully he'll get the help he needs. And when he's out of jail or when he pays his fine or whatever, he can go shoot another Kang movie or whatever. Like, that's fine. I don't see how you're supporting that.
No, I see. I see what you're saying. I just think that people nowadays, and especially with cancel culture in general, there's no separation between the artistic piece and the artist. It's just one and the same.
There's not, but I think there's a scared straight philosophy, right? I think everybody's trying to use Jonathan Majors not everybody, a lot of people are trying to use people like Jonathan Majors as opportunities to get power. I think they think like, I'm mad and this gives me a chance to strike at people who have made me mad. This will make them afraid. If we can drag James Gunn down, then this will make people afraid to make jokes that would hurt my feelings. And so I'm going to demand that he go into Hollywood jail and come out of it spectacularly successful, by the way. But I'm going to demand that in order to strike a blow, because I have sort of a undercurrent of hostility towards all the other people in my community and my culture. I don't know. In my mind, I think it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot healthier for everybody to just say, we don't know these people. They just do a job. It's like your mailman, right? As long as the mail shows up, you don't know if he's a good person. You don't know if he's a bad person. Even if you chat with him, which is more than you get with an actor, you still don't really know, right? So it shouldn't be terribly shocking that they have problems and that those problems sometimes need to be dealt with. I just don't think it's worth getting that worked up about.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about ruining someone's reputation for the rest of their life in just one.
Well, especially when they didn't do anything, right? I mean, I don't know if Jonathan Majors did or didn't do, but yeah, I mean, so often in these situations, we don't really know. We've got a little bit of information, usually out of context, and it's mostly presented because they need eyeballs.
Didn't Clint Eastwood do a movie about this, about the, what was it, the Olympic bomber or something, where they like hunted down this guy they were absolutely certain planted the bomb?
Yeah.
And then it just ruined his life because he couldn't, even though he was completely innocent, he could never get past, or people could never get past the fact that he was a suspect, so he must have done it, even when I think they figured out who did it in the end. So it's that idea that I think when people are blamed for whatever it is, I'm not saying whether they're guilty or not guilty, whatever the issue is, once they're blamed, and then later on, there's that little piece of news that says, oh, by the way, a new piece of evidence exonerates that person. No one ever listens to that part. They're already canceled. They're done.
Sure.
Yeah. Not to say there's not some bad people out there. That's not what I'm saying,
You heard it here first. There are no bad people.
Not here. Not on this podcast. Well, one out of the two isn't bad.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't think we're making the world a better place. I think in the case of Jonathan Majors, he needs help, and trying to tear him down only seems to fuel his ego in weird ways or make him more insecure and desperate. He had put an interview out not too long ago where he was talking a lot about how great he is. And on the heels of not so positive outcome regarding an evaluation of his actions and characters. So does that make him a bad actor? I don't, are we going to change him by not going to his movies, or is Disney going to change him or make society better by firing him? I don't know. I just think it's only a matter of time. Even if you think that works, it's still going to backfire. It's like a forest fire, right? You can burn a little bit and maybe it makes things better, but it's a fire. It's just going to keep burning, and it's going to become a weapon that people use. It already is, really, to take down people they don't like. And we're all just suckers playing along with it, letting our own desire to judge and watch people's lives fall apart or idolize others drive our bad behavior.
Yeah. Time will tell where all of this goes. If it keeps going down the slippery slope route, or if it reverses at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if Disney's smart enough to say, we'll look at some of these other people. We'll put Jonathan Majors on this PR plan to rehabilitate his image and get him back on board the MCU or other projects. I wouldn't be surprised if that was ongoing. Step one is fire him. Step two is, maybe get him into some therapy, or get him out of the spotlight for a little while, let things cool off, and then he can make a triumphant return as a rehabilitated person. And then we can control his image a little bit better and maybe get him back in the movies. I don't know.
Do you think society really supports, this is a much bigger issue, probably for another podcast, but do you think society really...
A better podcast?
There is no better podcast. Come on. You almost got me there. Do you think society supports rehabilitation in general? Do you think they see it as valid in the least?
Not really. No. And I think part of that's the prison system has let us down. They told that lie for too long, and now people just distrust the idea of rehabilitation. I don't think that people really understand that. Even people who've gone through it, I don't think necessarily believe it in others. Mm-hmm. But again, there's an undercurrent of hostility and suspicion in our society, and this stuff plays right into it. So maybe a time will come when we really do appreciate the value of rehabilitation. More and more people see that there are pathways out of almost any hole. And when they see other people, trying, then maybe they'll be a bit more compassionate and less judgmental. Yeah. But not right now. Right now, it's almost more fun to watch somebody like Jonathan Majors get taken down than it does to watch Quantum Mania again.
Yeah. On a very special Don't Encourage Us.
The more you know.
We dive deep into the issues here, people.
Yeah, we try.
You thought this was just a podcast about stuff and things? But there's so much more.
All right, should we move on to Dimension X?
Yeah, we definitely should.
Yeah, we got to work the reverb in there. We'll have the editor do that. Yeah, all right. So Dimension X, very, very interesting radio series. This was on, was it NBC? Yeah, 1950 NBC radio program. This is one of those epic classic gems. This is something that if you like science fiction, what's a good analogy? Like, it's like the original
Twilight Zone.
It's the root of it all. Oh, good. Twilight Zone. Right. Sure. But it's like Shakespeare if you like plays. It is. It's responsible for later projects like Twilight Zone, I think, or very influential.
It's like Don't Encourage Us if you like podcasts.
it's don't encourage us, but 60 years from now, right? When people are talking about these episodes,
the classics,
and how classic and how completely changed the culture.
No one listened to them at the time. It was
right?
only when the
But at the time, canceled after 50 episodes. It's a good analogy. Yeah. So 50 episodes. Now, this was understandably a bit of a darling of the staff at the time. It wasn't the first science fiction radio show aimed at adults, but it was the first one that adapted some existing sci-fi stories from now legendary authors like Asimov, Bradbury, Heinlein, Vonnegut, and a bunch of others, right? So these are really classic stories. I think most of them were adapted for the radio, so they were already written and then turned into radio programs. The show ran for about a year and a half. There was a break in the middle. There was an attempt to relaunch it as a series called X-1. It was about 4 or 5 years later. Because this is such a classic series, and if you haven't listened to it, you really should if you have any interest at all. It is widely available. It is all over the place. All right, podcast networks, websites, there are fan sites. Like, you can listen to every single episode for free if you like. So what did you think of this?
I was really impressed by it, especially for the time period. There's really, for the time period, of course, I always have to say that because obviously to a modern listener, it might seem kind of dated, but the acting, the voice acting was great. The special effects were really well done. And another part of it.
Yeah, the sound design was great.
That I found really good was the fact that they were done live in a lot of cases. Did you know that?
Yeah, the original episodes, the first few were done live. Crazy, huh?
Really crazy. And it seemed like the studios were trying to get big stars into this series. Did you notice that at the end? They would always announce.
I did. Yeah. Yeah, they invested in this. This was something they really believed in. And we can talk a little bit about why sci-fi was mainstream at this point and some of the themes in it, but absolutely, yeah. I think this was an attempt at a really A-list or a top line, top shelf product.
Yeah, and their view of the future is so fascinating. In the years that they mentioned, like the Hello Tomorrow, it's the year 4144 or something, or 4150.
I love the way they play with time. It's like sometimes it's like 1973 and everybody's like flying around in Mars, and other times it's like 5970 and everyone's still using like rotary phones.
It just depends what theme they jump on at that moment. Like genetics, it must be something from the year 4000 something, Flying cars, 1972, 71.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Actually, as a side note, the first radio show like this, kind of regular science fiction serial radio show aimed at adults, was called 2000 Plus. And the gimmick there, the title being all the episodes take place after the year 2000, as crazy as that sounds. And I listened to a little of it. The stories are not as well written. They're not classic sci-fi stories. They're still very entertaining and it's a lot of fun. But I think that was the first. This one came shortly after, and it was, I think, much better. And the writing, I mean, again, the production value, amazing. The acting, very, very good, very consistent, even though you have different actors all the time. So really high quality, but it's the writing that makes this series truly, truly epic and a must listen.
And the episodes are really easy to follow. There wasn't any moment where you felt, it reminded me of Chrysalis in the sense that it was very well put together. Like you said, the writing was so tight that you knew where you were in that world at every moment.
Yeah.
And it seems like every word was so well chosen to make it as tight as possible while still talking about very complex ideas and themes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really think of that, but now that I do, having listened to all the episodes, in many cases, several times, they are extremely tight. Like, not even to a fault. It's just right on that edge where the words are coming and they're all important and they move the story forward and set the stage and characterize the characters, really important piece of it that I never thought about. And so I guess that was a labor of love for some very talented adapters who took these short stories. And I think I did read that they had the original authors help or do a draft of some of the adaptations. But man, they are tight. Good point.
Why do you think they chose science fiction as the educational medium by which these stories were put together? Because I know it was part of NBC's educational arm, I read.
Mm-hmm.
And was it the Cold War and what was happening there? Or?
Yeah, that's what I would say. We talked about this a little bit when we did the episode on Notorious. It's an interesting period in world history, right? It's after World War II, but remember, World War II had a really spectacular end. The average person was expecting the war to go on for some time, especially in the Pacific Theater. There was no sign that the Japanese were going to give up. And I think the common idea was it was going to be a bloody, long-lasting, just wave after wave, fighting on these little islands. And then boom, right? As the movie Oppenheimer, I think, recently portrayed, it was all over in a flash, in a record, neck-twisting short period of time, it was done. And America was victorious, or the powers of the Allies were victorious. And it was done in a way that was shocking and unforgettable and really changed the way people viewed not just technology, but humanity and the future. And so science fiction, which I think prior to that period had been more of a kid's thing, it was something that children enjoyed. As the children came back, now adults from World War II, science fiction was right there to mature with them, grab hold of these themes and put them in a context that made them digestible, that helped people understand or figure out what they think about all these rapid changes and unexpected events. So I think that's why something like science fiction was poised to come to the forefront, and why so many of the authors of these episodes, these stories, are famous today, right? That they've been defining the genre, even though they're dead or retired. They're still the guiding voices in many ways.
I would argue that we're having a similar renaissance now around
science fiction, or
around science fiction.
Okay.
And AI in synthetic biology.
So you're equating technologies and saying that, but since, let's see, since about let's just say since the atom bomb, technology has continued to do that, right? We had the space race and the Cold War, which drove a lot of military technologies and space technologies, which made their way into, the microwave, right? Made its way into the home and so on. And now we have iPhones and ChatGPT. It was a massive shift in our culture toward technological progress. Mm-hmm. And it was driven partially by fear, which I think is evident in many of these episodes.
That's true. The misuse of technology, what could happen.
Mm-hmm. And the fear of falling behind, right? If you fall behind, so many stories are about advanced civilizations that have better technology, greater technology. They have a technological edge, right? Then there are a lot of stories about how humanity has a technological edge over the Martians, for example, and how we abuse that technological edge. And the cultures that don't have it, the alien cultures, lose out, or wiped out. And humanity is somewhat haunted by what they did because of their technological advance, right? And I think there's one great story where humans encounter aliens and they are technologically perfectly balanced. And so in the end, they kind of separate and decide they're going to be friends, right? So technology, you have to maintain. I think the philosophy developing and evident in a lot of these stories is you have to keep working on technology to maintain the edge, because if you don't, you fall behind and you get obliterated. You get wiped out.
Yeah, similar to the Cold War, right? Similar to this idea.
Oh, yeah. That's my point, is it's continued on till today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about, and the way that sci-fi, these authors were able to put these concepts about the future into a radio program that was easily digestible by anyone, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
think
Yeah.
it's really interesting how they did that. And I wonder if the government was involved in these productions in any way. I mean, in terms of like
Hmm.
nuclear energy or the space race or the or just the nuclear arms race. You know, this idea that you're talking about trying to keep up in that there's an actual competition around technology.
Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. I mean, one could hypothesize, perhaps in a science fiction short story, that in the 1940s, after World War II, the US government realized that maintaining a technological edge is critical to the success or survival of America. So they figured out, oh, how do we encourage, with both the carrot and the stick, people to invest in technology? How do we get Americans to want to study and develop technology and support it financially with tax dollars? And we use a show like Dimension X
Mm-hmm.
to do it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, these stories make technology the good guy, the hero, and the villain
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time. And I think that's, I don't know, like it's certainly, I don't know if it was intentional. I don't think it was driven by some invisible hand behind the scenes, but it's resulted in even today, like we're obsessed with tech.
Mm-hmm.
We're always interested in the next development and getting ahead and using it, like ChatGPT, right? Use it so you can personally get ahead,
Yes.
and compete with others, right? And that makes sense to us. And I don't know that generations before World War II, I don't know that that would make sense to them, that you get some sort of piece of technology and it gives you an advantage and that's what you should do. I don't know. Maybe it's the Industrial Revolution where that started to creep in, but I don't know that it really settled in the average person until after World War II.
I was listening to a podcast recently where they were theorizing. I forget his name. He's a really famous physicist. Oh, it'll come to me. But during the podcast, they were talking about this idea: why are humans so technologically driven, and why are we so focused in on developing technology? Is this something that's kind of like baked into our DNA in some way? Like, are we an alien species that like our evolution is based on technology and eventually getting off Earth using technology, and that's why
Yeah.
we're so obsessed with it, and that's what kind of seemingly drives us? I mean, there's no answer to this, but it was kind of an interesting conversation around technology in general. Like, why are we so
I
connected to
think
it? You know?
I think that's a biased perspective. I think there are a lot of humans who are not driven by technology in the same way, right? I think there are entire continents where the average person is not thinking about technology as something that needs to advance and that they need to develop, right? I just think that is I don't want to say Western. It's like a Euro-American. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, I think their point wasn't more around the average person, but the idea that technology drives humanity forward. So, overall, like this idea of, let's say, getting off of Earth and populating Mars, or going to the moon and starting like space stations around the moon, whatever it might be, the things that are going to affect all of humanity as a whole. And from, let's say it's only 1% or less than 1% of the population driving it, that affects everyone from the average person to every other level of humanity. I think that was more of what they were trying to say. Not on an
So why
individual.
is technology so impactful? That's not a question you need to ask. You know what I mean? Like
Why?
the way you phrased it, it sounded like, why are we so focused on
That's,
technology and advancing?
yeah, and advancing technology. Yeah, not just like that
Yeah.
it's something we're interested in, but it's almost like we're hardwired for it. I see what you're saying, that the average person may not be, but I'm saying, let's say there's a percentage of the population, 1% of the population that's also has this like drive towards technology. They're the ones that are going to advance technology for everyone. It's like at every single level.
Yeah, well, it's a competitive edge, right? Like, I don't think as a species we're hardwired to advance or to think about or focus on technology as a solution or to dedicate our lives to, studying and developing new technology. I just don't think that's who we are as a people. I do think that the people who are like that, the cultures that encourage it, and the individuals who embrace it do have a competitive advantage increasingly, right? It's probably always been the case, but it's probably been far less impactful. So it hasn't been as much of an advantage for them.
I see.
But now, and I would trace this probably in starting maybe in Europe, but this idea that advancing technology, building your culture around that concept, right, increasingly is a good idea, and now it's winning out. And it could be that's the thing that takes us down, right? The fact that the human cultures that did value technology did get a competitive advantage, did spread both in population and those ideas and in what parts of the world they inhabit. And then the technology finally reached a point where it affected everyone, whether they were interested in that or not, worldwide, right? And then maybe eventually that's what does us in. At least after watching these episodes, that would seem, or listening to these shows, it would seem to be a reasonable conclusion.
So technology, in essence, as a survival mechanism.
Yeah, it's like religion, right? So you look at cultures around the world, and so many of them have religious beliefs or did for a long time. And it was an advantage, having an organized religion. It probably fostered unity. It created some rules that make getting along and building larger population centers work, help people cooperate and build bigger societies and be more successful, get through hard times. And now we're sort of letting that go, right? More and more parts of the world are moving away from religion and those rules, and technology has become more and more the centerpiece. Anyway, yeah, I think there are a lot of things that give a culture advantages.
That's what Yuval Harari calls that dataism. It's like the worshiping of data and technology. And he theorizes that that's really where we're headed now. Like a lot of humanity's leaving these older religions aside, but replacing it with giving themselves over to the data to kind of run their existence, which seems to be happening.
Right. It's, culture shifts in the direction by default of whatever gives it an advantage, because the people who embrace that, maybe initially a minority, eventually become the majority. And then that brings a lot of problems, and historically other shifts occur. So these episodes, I think, from Dimension X do emphasize that or play that out over time, sometimes to a good point, sometimes to a bad one. Really, really good. You actually referenced an episode that we can talk briefly about. Hello Tomorrow featured a famous actress, Nancy Olson, who had recently done a lot of things. What's the name of
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard, right. So she had recently been in that. She is still alive today, currently 95 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's not that long ago, right? Still within someone's lifetime. When you listen to the episodes, it feels like you're listening to something from the Renaissance or the Dark Ages, but we forget how long people live and how much things change, in a short period of time. So anyway, Nancy Olson still alive. In brief, Hello Tomorrow tells the story of humanity's future. I might have missed a detail or two, but I think basically this is after World War III and radiation has covered the planet. So now all humans live underground. The way that they've survived is to create a society that is very particular about who reproduces. They've sort of mastered or become obsessed with genetics. So they regulate that. And then the other piece, the other thing that the other pillar of their society is emotional stability, right? So there's a lot of emotional repression and an attempt to, well, you can't have love if you're trying to get people to bond and reproduce based on their genetics alone. So emotions are out, genetics are in, and they have this underground society. Our main character, whose name escapes me, Nancy Olson,
Lois, I think her name.
Lois. Very good. Yeah, that's right. All right. Lois is an educator, and she requests, or what's the good word? She acquires or arranges for a genetically imperfect person to be released from the lower levels of this underground city they live in, brought up to speak to her class, and in classic 1950s style, she falls in love with him in the course of about like 30 minutes. Desperately in love.
You mean about 1 minute?
To the point where she
in audio show time.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to fill in some like time passing that they didn't note, like 1 hour later, I love you, but yeah, it's in about a minute.
I actually had to stop it, and I was like, wait a minute, what's happening now? These two are together? It went by so fast.
She was completely disgusted by him, and he was kind of like a thing. And then next we know, she is head over heels. Like they are absolutely obsessed with each other and just decide to be together forever, which is so fast. But I guess that's the way they did it back then. So anyway, her, I guess, fiance? Is that the right word? She's engaged or arranged to be married to some jerk. That guy has enough power to have the specimen, Oren, I believe is his name, the guy with a bum leg. So he arranges to have Oren murdered. And what's her name again?
Lois.
Shoot. Lois?
Thank
you. Lois. Yeah, it's not a super memorable name. But anyway, Lois agrees to marry the guy if he'll spare Oren's life. And then the guy lies, and Oren escapes his assassination and runs through the tunnels into the radiation zone back to the surface of the earth. And Lois follows him. They connect with each other. They escape back to the surface of the earth, which is irradiated but somehow full of life. And then we get a nice lecture on how, I guess, evolution has made everybody immune to radiation over 2,000 years or something like that. So, love story. They get to be together, kind of an Adam and Eve situation. So great story. I didn't do it justice. Still worth a listen. The details are really what make these episodes great. What was your reaction to that story?
I thought it was really interesting, this idea, the adaptability idea. And that was a nice little twist, that the radiation had been leaking down for so many years, but no one, it was just generational. But no one had thought, everyone was under the impression that if they stepped outside out of this bunker that they would immediately die. So they were kind of like the pioneers, I almost thought about it as like the first men on the moon, the pioneers who go out there, they make it back from the moon, just like this couple survives in a new Earth. So basically they're on a new planet. I thought that was interesting. How the radiation leaked down and built this immunity over so many millennia, but they had the technology, I guess, where they might have been able to figure that out, but no one ever thought to figure it out. That was just their existence. They were just like the that idea of like the tiny elephant is chained to a tree, but then he grows up and he can just run away from the tree and break the chain, but never does because they're so used to being chained to it. It was that idea. I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, this idea is almost more from a science perspective or a cultural perspective. It's more interesting what happens next, right? Setting aside this idea that two people could repopulate, they sort of imply that. I guess that's because a lot of listeners of the show are going to have grown up Christian. So they're going to be aware of, or Jewish, they're going to be aware of the Adam and Eve story, and it isn't going to seem strange to them that two people could, just keep reproducing and have a whole new society, even though it was followed by a brief lecture on evolution and genetics and adaptation. So That's a weird pairing to me. But that aside, right? Now you have these two cultures, presumably, one on the surface of the earth and the other one, like you said, these people who believe and they're indoctrinated to the idea that the surface is poison. So they're not going to change overnight.
Right.
There's a whole power structure based on everybody staying underground. And that's a more interesting or an additional interesting area to explore. So yeah, I don't know. And it's not like at the end of this story, our couple tore down that civilization, right? They barely made a ripple, pretty much everyone would just assume they were dead and then go right back to the same society that they had before. So not a complete global change.
It's an interesting commentary on the fixed mindset versus an open mindset, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually I'm sure that was a theme in the 50s that was interesting too. So yeah, that comes up a lot, right? This idea of sort of the free spirit versus the person who toes the line. And that was a cultural shift that since then has pretty much reversed, right? So in the 40s and 50s, the idea was you be part of the team, right? Don't make waves. And then that spectacularly reversed. And now it's all about being a rebel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I think that showed up in science fiction often, long before probably it made its way into regular society. Maybe science fiction helped make that happen.
Quite possibly. Shows like Dimension X and The Twilight Zone and others.
Yeah. Well, young people grow up watching these movies, listening to these shows. They absorb these ideas. Like you said, this was for everybody. I think it's sophisticated enough that it was probably aimed at adults, but I'm sure a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers listen to this stuff and they thought about it. We could talk about every one of these episodes, and there were ideas in there that we take for granted today that were new back then. Mm-hmm. And so people were absorbing them, and it probably really contributed to the cultural shifts that we live in now.
What was the difference between X-1 and Dimension X?
X-1 was, I think it was a little bit better sound quality. I don't know if the technology had improved. I think they really committed. Like they just said, we're going to do this again. And they used a lot of the same scripts. And I think they even used some of the same actors. And they took another stab at it, but it ultimately just didn't last either. Some good stuff in there, though. And if you want, you can listen to the exact same story in one and the other. And sometimes there's some differences. I prefer Dimension X, so I focused on that one here. Mm-hmm. I think X-1, the quality drops a little as you go.
Yeah, there were certain episodes, and the moon be still as bright. That episode, the sound quality wasn't as good. I also heard that some of those episodes were lost. They weren't properly stored or something.
I think they're all still around, but yeah, the quality is very variable. Definitely. Yeah. And some of them it's, I guess with modern earbuds and so on and so forth, you can sort of crank it up and the quality is good enough to listen to, but it's a little bit more of a strain with some than others. Mm-hmm. I think they're all worth it though. Oh, yeah. Even the ones where the story sort of just ends and isn't as good, or I don't know, it's just super dated all the way through. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot to engage your mind. Yeah. And you can think yourself about how these ideas played out or were abandoned.
Mm-hmm. And they're short enough that, it's not a huge time commitment.
No, and you can take a break and come back. It's not one long string. It's not one story. It's totally episodic. So you can just kind of listen to it when you feel like it. And again, it's free. So I highly recommend it.
Same.
All right. Anything else about Dimension X?
It would be interesting to hear from the audience, though, a little bit.
Yeah. What do we want to know from the audience? What do you think?
Are there any modern sci-fi authors that you'd want to see one of their short stories adapted into an episode like this? It seems like we're going back into the serialized podcasts are just so popular now that it would be interesting to see how this would be redone nowadays,
Yeah. Cixin Liu is a Chinese science fiction author I'm a huge fan of. And he does have some great short stories. I don't know how well they would translate in this format, but I would sure love to find out. So yeah, I think he's a great example.
You know what's going to be on Netflix? Three Body Problem.
Three Body Problem. Yeah, it's coming out. I didn't actually watch the trailer yet.
Trailer's good.
I'm worried.
Trailer's good.
I'm worried.
I haven't read the book.
Well, then I'll check it out.
I haven't read the books, but the trailer's good. Who knows what's going to happen, though? It might be very difficult to adapt, though, right?
I mean, they got some good talent to try. There's a lot. It's a very long novel, and it takes a while to kind of read through it. So if you do what I think you have to do with novels like that, and you cut a lot, and you streamline and combine characters, and then you rearrange events, right? But you make it into something that makes the same points and sets the same tone and achieves a lot of the same thing, then yes, this could be phenomenal. And of course, there are more novels in that series. There's even some additional, or there was another sort of add-on novella written by another author. I mean, and where it goes is mind-blowing. So especially from where it starts. So yeah, I mean, I hope it's good. If you're listening to this and you have the endurance to read some pretty heavy, pretty thick stuff, get started now so that you're not spoiled by the show. Because it might make the novels kind of unreadable if you're not being surprised very often. But go ahead and get into it because it's really good stuff. I am very, very curious to see how they do because it is a lot to chew on. Yeah. These novels are huge, really expansive. So yeah, I think that's a great question for the audience. I would love to hear that from them. I'd also love to know, are there any other gems like this that I have yet to find? You know, I kind of stumbled on this one. It's not like there are billboards up, you know, reminding people that Dimension X is out there for free. There's probably a lot of other great, really classic stuff that I just haven't hit on yet. I need to surf idly more. So I would love to, any recommendations, anybody who listens to Dimension X and you think, oh man, if he likes this, he should check that out. Please share it. I'll share it with the audience. All right. So thank you to the people who made the projects that we talked, or project. I guess they're each sort of individual projects, right? Mm-hmm. So thank you to the people who put those together. Thank you to the listeners. As always, don't worry about liking or subscribing. You've got enough on your plate to do. You can reach the show at don'tencourage@gmail.com. You can write some nasty comments on our YouTube channel. You can connect with us on Instagram or on Twitter or X, I guess I should call it. It's funny how X made its way into our culture and it became a thing. It's not just like a 90s thing where everything was extreme. But before that, you know, the X-ray and Dimension X, and I guess that was a big victory of math.
Right.
They figured out how to get some popularity there.
Math won again.
Anyway, so you can find us on... Another win for math. You can find us on Twitter or X. Check out the show notes for more information. I'll probably remember to link some of the episodes or some of the podcasts that put these episodes out for free. And we will see you next week.
Take care, everybody.